Listen, I did film and television studies at university for 3 years. I spent hours reading countless books and articles on subjects spanning from film all the way to television. Not a single one mentioned Hugh Grant once.
I achieved the hardest qualification across any university or college ever, a 2-1 in history. Let me tell you, the only thing that I learned was that we, as a society, have a history of denying and neglecting Hugh Grant's artistic and cultural relevance, not just in this country, but in the entire world.
I met Oscar at a Hugh Grant-themed event I put on at the Students' Union.
It felt as though Diggory and I were the only ones there, and we agreed that there was a Hugh Grant-shaped hole in academia.
We decided to put it right ourselves. We want to show people that he's an icon in acting.
We want to show people he's more than just a bumbling posh guy.
I'm Diggory Waite.
And I'm Oscar Beardmore Gray. And this is...
Taking Hugh for Granted.
Hello and welcome to Taking Hugh for Granted, the podcast in which two scholars watch every single film starring Hugh Grant in the attempt to answer the simple question: is this film taking Hugh for granted? Is this film good on its own, or does it rely on the bumbling Brit for its acclaim? I'm Diggory Waite, and I'm joined as ever by my colleague and fellow Hugh Grant academic, Oscar Beardmore Gray. Oscar, how are you doing today, mate?
I'm doing excellently, Diggory. I'm just in a state of shock still. Because Diggory and I have been in a state of shock because in the last week or so we have seen a meteoric rise in the numbers of listeners we have to the pod, and it's humbling. It's humbling.
If you are new around here, it's absolutely lovely to have you around. You're just Hugh Grant fans like us, and it's an absolute joy to share this podcast with you.
It's amazing because we knew that there are thousands, if not millions, of Hugh Grant fans out there, and it's all about, you know, finding our way to you. And luckily, some of you have come back and found your way to us. Probably, we think, on the back of Hugh Grant's 60th birthday, which was truly an epic day for everyone who's a Hugh Grant fan.
Big time, big time. I was arrested, just to confirm that, because I was running around Fulham with a caterpillar cake, wearing no clothes, shouting, "Hugh! Hugh, where are you? Happy birthday!" But they've dropped the charges.
Can you give us a bit of background on your Hugh Grant candle? Because some people would have seen it online. It is a thing of beauty.
My lovely sister, shout out to you, Flossie, who is the new biggest Taking Hugh for Granted fan, actually. She hadn't listened for a while because I think she was afraid that it would be shit. But she started listening to the podcast and she loves it, which is really, really sweet. Anyway, she last Christmas bought me a candle where it's Hugh with his face superimposed on that of a bishop, perhaps the Pope himself, in a lovely, tall, thin, slim, white candle. And I hadn't actually lit this candle until Hugh's 60th birthday. I thought, I'll wait from the 25th of December right through to the 9th of September. And it was a wonderful evening. As I say, I just had that, a caterpillar cake, and no clothes on, running around Fulham. The only thing illuminating my naked, thin, fish-like body, running around the streets of South London.
What a sight.
It was. And as I say, the police weren't too happy. I was also covered in wax, and I was quite slippery, so it did chase me for quite some time. Again, thank you so much if you are listening and you're new. It's just great to have you guys around. And it's great, Oscar, to be back at it again, reviewing another one of Hugh's old gems, Restoration 1995. Should we get into this one?
Let's get straight into it, Diggs.
Restoration, directed by Michael Hoffman and released in 1995. After befriending King Charles II, played by Sam Neill, aspiring young physician Robert Merivel, played by Robert Downey Jr, is living a new, lavish lifestyle in the King's court. In order to retain his new position, King Charles enlists Merivel to marry his favourite mistress, Celia, played by Polly Walker, in order to divert the suspicions of the King's other, increasingly jealous mistresses. However, though Celia is to be married, the King wants her to remain his mistress and gives Merivel a simple instruction: you must marry my mistress, but do not fall in love with her. Inevitably, Merivel falls for Celia, and though he intends to keep his fondness a secret from the King, it's only a matter of time before disgruntled painter Finn, played by Hugh Grant, gives the game away.
So, Oscar, Restoration, 1995. Quick overview of the film. I know we've just had a synopsis from Synopsis Simon, but I think this tells you all you need to know about the film. This film stars Robert Downey Jr. as a young physician who befriends King Charles II. Already, alarm bells are ringing. King Charles II and famous Manhattan-born actor Robert Downey Jr.
God, when you put it like that, it's so right. The alarm bells are ringing.
Exactly. And so when I clicked on Robert Downey Jr.'s IMDb page, there must be something wrong, because in his 4 featured films, Restoration isn't on there. So obviously I sent an email to IMDb to make sure that was sorted. This film won 2 Oscars. One for Best Art Direction / Set Decoration and Best Costume Design, which, to be fair, both were fabulous. And according to IMDb, the film cost an estimated $19 million to make and recoup just over $4 million worldwide.
Christ.
This really is quite a fascinating film, because the cast, Oscar, what did you make of the cast?
Well, it's star-studded. I mean, you've got Ian McKellen.
Yeah, Sir Ian McKellen.
Exactly. We got Robert Downey Jr. and we got Hugh Grant. So, I mean, and there's a few other people I'm not so well versed in, but
Sam Neill plays King Charles. He's in Jurassic Park, Hunt for the Wilder People, Peaky Blinders, where he plays a Grace. And then you have Meg Ryan.
Such a good impression.
When Harry Met Sally. She is Sally.
Of course.
David Thewlis, a.k.a. Lupin from Harry Potter.
Professor Lupin. You love to see that kind of connection.
Just to warn listeners, we will be referring to him as Lupin throughout the rest of the show. No way are we going to refer to him as John Pierce, because that's just not right. I know I'm just currently listing things off IMDb, but I have to list this last thing. According to IMDb, Ian McKellen co-wrote a film adaptation of Richard III and was released in 1995. And McKellen was struck by Robert Downey Jr.'s talent and his attitude on the set of this film, Restoration, and so invited him on to Richard III because he thought an American might help with marketing the movie. I don't mind that at all. I think that's great. What I don't appreciate is IMDb putting it like this. McKellen was struck by Downey's talent and attitude compared to some of the other British cast members, so invited Downey onto the film. Other British cast members. Now,
who's he referring to?
Who's he referring to there? Robert Downey Jr. and Hugh Grant are the only 2 actors of the main actors in this film who are in the age range that could have played whatever role Robert Downey Jr. played in Richard III. That is such a fucking dig. If you're going to call out Hugh Grant, call him out.
I think Sir Ian McKellen might have just added his name to our naughty list.
Well, we're not sure if it's Ian McKellen, to be fair, because this is IMDb. So whoever wrote that for IMDb, they're on our naughty list. But I understand, Oscar, that perhaps Robert Downey Jr. should be on our naughty list for another reason.
Well, indeed, Diggory. So Robert Downey Jr. and Hugh Grant have a little bit of beef. Going back to 1995. I mean, to be fair, Hugh Grant kind of started the beef, because in an interview in 2018 with, I believe it was People's Magazine or something like that, People's TV, it was, a standard interview where classically the interviewer is asking Hugh about his relationship with his co-stars, and he's saying how insane they all are, like he normally does. And then they get to Robert Downey Jr. and he was like, oh, he
hated me. We did a thing called Restoration, and he took one look at me and wanted to kill me.
Why would he hate you on sight?
I don't know. I was so hurt.
I don't think anybody really hates you.
Oh, he did.
So anyway, obviously that caused a few headlines and shook the Hollywood world a little bit.
2 heavyweights going at it.
Exactly, and let's be honest, the 2 actors couldn't be any further apart from each other, really. You got New York City boy, cool, good-looking in his own way, Robert Downey Jr., and then, Hugh Grant.
Yeah.
So in 2018, Robert Downey Jr. tweeted Hugh Grant saying, in a way of apology, he said, "A lot has happened over the last 2 decades. I respect how Mr. Grant has matured as an artist and a voice against violations of privacy. Let's bake bread together soon. Hacked off Hugh. Hashtag bury the hatchet 2018. Whatever that's meant to mean."
Yeah, nice.
And then Hugh Grant replied saying, "Thanks at Robert Downey Jr. Nice way to kick off the year. And if you're ever in London, come back and break bread," whatever that means. "Won't be easy as my 5-year-old bakes it, but you seem strong. Respect."
I mean, it's interesting though, because Robert Downey Jr. isn't sort of assuaging those rumours. He's saying, oh, a lot has changed and Hugh seems to have matured. I'm not going to lie. That's a bit of shade being thrown on our Hugh there.
I mean, there's absolutely no doubt that they didn't get along particularly well because, like you said, that suggests to me that a lot has happened over that time. So things have changed.
Indeed.
And Hugh admitted that he thinks he hates him. So
well, there you go. Well, I wonder whether we put Robert Downey Jr. on the naughty list for this one to go along, with Colin Firth, Savage Javid,
Piers Morgan,
all of these enemies of the state. Frankly, to us, I think we'll leave that one up for review because I actually have a lot of good words to say about Robert Downey Jr. in this film. So, but speaking about the film and talking a little bit more specifically about it, let's do that.
Well, you're listening to Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted on the radio. Hugh Grant taking Hugh for granted. Oh, the podcast show.
So, Oscar, we're going to do this slightly differently today, and we're going to talk about Hugh a little bit later, just because his role in the film comes slightly later in, so it makes more sense. What did you think about the beginning of this film?
Well, I mean, you know what? I did like it because it was bloody mental. I mean, it's got everything that you want from the beginning of a film. It makes you sit up and pay attention, basically. You've got drinking, sex, monarchy, weddings, decadence. It's got everything you want. And there's this really weird scene at the beginning that we wanted to talk about where there's like some bloke turns up and he's got a beating heart coming out of his chest, basically, like his open heart surgery.
Yeah.
And,
talking with his heart literally basically hanging out of his chest. It's insane.
And Robert Downey Jr. is invited to go and touch it.
Because no one dares touch it. But much like Arthur in The Sword of the Stone, with Excalibur, Robert Downey Jr. is the only one who has the balls, the gumption, to try it.
My first note I wrote was, okay, this is kind of weird.
You're touching the organ, sir. Can you not feel my grip? I feel nothing at all. No pain? Nothing.
Through that interaction with the heart, Robert Downey Jr. befriends the king, so much so that they spend a year together with Robert Downey Jr. chirps in birds.
Of course he is. Almost having a threesome with the king.
The premise of this film is so good. So the king goes, right, I've got this guy around, Robert Downey Jr., and he loves sex, he loves drink, he loves banquets so much that I'm going to marry him off to my mistress and tell him, don't fall in love with my mistress. Don't sleep with her. Don't do anything. And I know you won't fall in love with her because you love playing the field too much.
It's Shakespearean. It's Shakespearean at heart.
So they have this wedding and everyone chases them into bed together, Robert Downey Jr. and this woman, and they kiss to throw everyone off the scent. And then they're in bed together, but Robert Downey Jr. clearly really likes her.
He's got like a little feather on his dick.
Oh, yeah, because he's naked. And then what do you see behind him?
Oh wow, that was a little bit alarming, to be honest. You got the King Charles II crawling on all fours with a kind of ram face mask on.
It's terrifying.
He sort of jumps into bed and he's like, "Oh, jolly good old chap, why don't you deceive them?" And then he's like, "Off you go."
Yeah, it's time for me to actually consummate this marriage.
I believe our kiss convinced them, Lady Celia.
Well done, Merivel. Well done. We fooled them all. You are a most useful fellow, Merivel. Most useful. And at the moment, you are most useful to me in Suffolk.
Tell me a little bit about when he goes to Suffolk, where he's supposed to live with his paper wife.
Yeah, well, his butler is the great Ian McKellen, and he kind of falls into a bit of a depressed state, and Ian McKellen sort of helps him through that, and he's depressed because he has fallen in love with his wife, but his wife, who is the king's mistress, is up in London the whole time, doing bits with the king.
Yeah.
And he never gets to see her, and it's at this point that the great man himself comes into the frame.
Merivel, there is someone to see you. This is Mr. Finn, a painter.
Excellent. Did I send for a painter? No, sir. Never mind.
Merivel, Mr. Finn has arrived with a commission.
A commission? From whom? Robin Hood?
Robin Hood. Oh, yeah. My Lincoln Green. How funny. Now, if I may, this letter commands the following commission by one Elias Finn, myself. A noble and beautiful portrait of Lady Merivel. An excellent painting will earn Mr. Finn a small place at court. So you see, not Robin Hood, the king.
I was speaking to someone at work today telling them about this film, and they were like, oh, how does Hugh look in this film? Is he sexy? And I was like, no. 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 Look, I am the first person to tell you how sexy Hugh looks in the film. Is he sexy in this film? No, he's not.
He's the opposite of that.
Exactly. He has the big bushy hair that everyone has. You know, he looks like a member of Kiss. And the beauty spot just above his lip. He's this painter who's been commissioned to paint Robert Downey Jr.'s paper wife. And Robert Downey Jr. has been doing some painting himself. And this is the first time we're introduced to Hugh, because obviously he's like, oh, Hugh, come and take a look at my painting. What do you think? And this is the first moment that Hugh has. And I laughed my head off. Hugh's reaction to Robert Downey Jr.'s shit painting is to sort of recoil his face, and it's like he's giving himself whiplash. He's like, he's trying to keep his eyes on it and be polite, but he has to whip his eyes away, and he's like smacking his neck back. It's brilliant. It's a masterstroke.
Literally a masterstroke, like on a canvas.
Nice, dude. I love that. Very good. But and Hugh Grant's character is so over the top. He plays it so over the top. He plays it so... It's very camp. It's in some way...
I was going to say that. Yeah.
And I have to say, for me, that the script isn't the greatest in this film, and a lot of characters, some are playing it very straight and serious, and some are playing it very over the top. Hugh Grant is the guy, and I'm not just saying this because I'm biased, who gets the most out of the script and plays it so over the top. Every line he says, he brings some real humour to it. Like when he's like, no, I didn't get this from Robin Hood, I got it from the king. And his little laughs and stuff, it was so great having him on. What did you think of Hugh Grant?
Tiggs, I love your enthusiasm, but I have to say I'm not sure I was as gung-ho for him as you are. No. I mean, okay, objectively speaking, from taking Hugh for granted podcast speaking, he was great.
Of course.
But, yeah, he hasn't been done too many favours by the costumes department.
No.
Well,
they were Oscar-winning, by the way. They did win an Oscar for this.
I mean, he's wearing sort of Slytherin-esque robes. You know, he's got one of those, like you said, sort of judge wigs that comes down to his ankles. And the beauty spots for me, they just don't do it for me. He's got a couple. He's got one under his nose, and then one kind of on his forehead almost.
Yeah, by his temple.
And he's looking very, very ghost-like. He's got all the foundation on that looks a little dodgy. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure this was his characterization, but he's a bit pompous. Yeah, he's got a red beret that makes him look very sort of, I don't know, maybe a bit French, but not that we got anything against French people. But yeah, I'm not sure, Diggs. It's hard to get behind a little bit, but he plays a crucial role in the film.
He overhears, against the will of the king, Robert Downey Jr. fancies his paper wife.
Not just fancy, loves her.
Loves her. Hugh Grant overhears this and thinks, ooh, here's my chance to get one up on Robbie Downey Jr. here. So Hugh Grant goes back to the king and tells the king that Robert Downey Jr. is falling in love with the king's mistress. We just hear about that, though. We don't see it happen. And that is a real shame, because every moment Hugh Grant's on screen for me, he steals the scene, and I know I'm looking out for him, so maybe I'm biased, but I actually think his character's great comic relief. He smashes the performance, in my opinion, and there's a great chance there. That is the linchpin of the film.
I know, right there.
Right there, where the villain, I suppose, of this moment goes back and sneakily tells the king. And you don't see it. You just hear about it on screen.
Yeah, I don't know. Why didn't they show that?
I have no idea. It's such a waste. It's like, that's the juicy bit. Why are you not showing us that bit?
Well, to be honest, that's the turning point in the film to when it really kind of goes downhill a bit.
Well. Let's talk about the second half.
Who wants some more? More film chat, film chat. More film chats on the way. Some more film chat, film chat. With Oscar and Diggory. More film chat, film chat. Today is the day for more film chat, film chat. Chat, and a Hugh Grant film. Hooray!
So yeah, Diggs, the second half, it's a real contrast really to the first half. What are your initial thoughts on it?
I'm so glad you asked me. This film very much reminded me of a film called From Dusk Till Dawn, directed by Robert Rodriguez, actually released in the same year. It stars George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino acting, and their fugitive brothers on the run. Now, that film, I would implore everyone to go and at least watch the opening of From Dusk Till Dawn. One of the best openings ever to a film, I think. Totally grips you, is great. The first hour of that film is two fugitives on the run, and then they go to a bar, and a certain thing happens. If you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. I won't spoil it for those of you that didn't, because I went in cold, and I was like, oh my God. The film completely switches on its head, like that. That very much feels like this film. This film has been ridiculous, over the top, funny, fabulous, great fun. Everyone's taking the piss. And then suddenly, the king finds out, banishes Robert Downey Jr., and now Robert Downey Jr. finds himself in a mental hospital.
It's literally going from like the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory to Les Miserables in like.
Honestly, Oscar, you've smashed it. That is. Put that on the fucking poster. That is exactly it. Oh my God, that's exactly it. There's no better way to describe it. It's actually very bleak and very sad.
Bleak. There's death.
There's death.
Poverty, grief.
Yeah. What did you think about this switch? It was bizarre.
It was horrendous. So I messaged you about 50 minutes into the film being like, this is brilliant. This is fantastic. About 10 minutes later, I was kind of like, what? All right, this is...
What is going on? What happened? Like, it's literally like someone's just sucked the fun out of the party. It's completely bizarre, and it's not in keeping with the rest of the film at all. So Lupin has invited him to come stay, and this also really pissed me off, is Lupin is going, guys, this guy Robert Downey Jr., he's the best physician I've ever met in my life. The guy's a genius. He left the physician game to go and be a bachelor, but he's back now. Boys, listen to what he has to say. Then Robert Downey Jr. comes in and goes, oh, maybe we should treat their mental health in this way. And Lupin goes, you fucking what? You idiot. We're not going to try that, you dumb bastard. And every time, and then Robert Downey Jr. is like, well, how about we try this? And he goes, are you insane? You're a twat. What are you doing here? Get out. You're a fool. You're an idiot. And it's like, why are you inviting him then? You're the one who was gassing him up. What is going on? What is going on? Look over there. Hugh Grant's in a Pret. Look over there. He's holding a baguette.
The other thing that really actually annoyed me about the second half was that we had this brilliant love triangle going on between the king, Celia, the mistress, and Robert Downey Jr. And suddenly, there's another woman on the scene, completely from nowhere. She's a bit, she's something not right in the head. Robert Downey Jr. ends up having a kid with her.
I'm sorry, it's just not on. It's not on. This woman is so... She's mentally ill. She doesn't sleep at night. She runs around screaming that people are going to... She rips her clothes so that she can constantly be on the watch for men who've abused her. Right? That's dark. This is not the film that we were watching in the first half. This is so dark. This mentally unwell person, and she is, starts then getting her foot and rubbing Robert Downey Jr.'s private parts. And Robert Downey Jr., removes her foot. Fantastic. She tries it again. He goes, oh, bloody hell, go on then. And they have passionate sex, and this results in a child. Now, do you think when you're a young physician, when you're a doctor, and you've taken a Hippocratic oath, it's okay to have your mentally ill patient and you go, yeah, go on then, I'll have sex with them? That is not okay. That is an abuse of power.
It is abuse of power, and it's against the doctor's code.
Don't get me wrong. There can be bad deeds done by good characters, but we need to see some of that, struggle, internal struggle, being like, oh, I really want to bang her, but she is mentally ill. There could have been something there. None of that. She then is with child, and unfortunately, the film goes from bad to worse. The child's too big. It won't come out. Either she has to die or the child has to die. So they cut the child out. Post this, we then have the bubonic plague and then a great massive fire in London. The film just sort of jumps all over the place. What did you make of those last 20, 30 minutes where it's just bad to worse to worse to bad?
Yeah, it's muddled, Diggs, because, we've got a classic kind of period piece from that kind of age, 1600s, where they're trying to fit in as many historical bits. Basically, the only interesting thing that happened in the 1600s was the bubonic plague, the Great Fire of London, and the restoration of the monarchy, which was Charles II. They were like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's do an interesting story with some American guy in that time period. And we'll fit it all together and bundle the storyline around it. So it did slightly feel like that. Suddenly we've got Robert's back in London, treating people with the plague, being a bit of a sort of saviour.
Bit of a hero.
And then the next moment, his daughter is about to be burned to pieces in a huge blaze. Yeah, it doesn't really fit together. It was disappointing, the ending of this film, it's got to be said.
There was no thread. We had a thread in the first half. The thread was, marry my mistress, but don't fall in love with her. What's the thread in the second half? The thread is just, I meet this person, we're going to have a child, she's died. Oh, suddenly there's a fire. It's just, there's no thread that goes through it. There's nothing to tie those events together. This really is, to use a soccer/football analogy, it really is a game of two halves. And the first half of this film is a film on its own. They could have stretched out to an hour and a half, marry this woman, but don't fall in love with her. Brilliant film. That'd be great. It's just been stuck on this weird second half.
Well, I will note that Hugh Grant wasn't in the second half of the film at all, so cannot be blamed for the failure.
Taking he for granted. Taking he for granted. Taking he for granted. What did you think, lads? Were they taking he for granted?
Diggory, wait, another episode of Taking Hugh for Granted, and we got to this point. Restoration 1995. Are we taking Hugh for granted?
Oh, Oscar, I think the fans at home, or wherever they're listening, washing the dishes, on the train to work, in the car, I think they're going to guess what I'm going to have to say here. If this film had been cut in half, and we just watched the first half, mate, that's a great film. That is hilarious, it's funny, it's silly, it's great. Unfortunately, the second half is a stain on this film, and it is rubbish, it's boring, and worst of all, it's committed the cardinal sin of not using Hugh Grant enough at all. Especially when they have the perfect moment to, when Hugh Grant dobs in our main character, Robert Downey Jr. Oscar, this film, in some ways more than most, has been taking Hugh for granted. What about you? What did you think? Have we been taking Hugh for granted?
Diggs, we definitely have been. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you're a bit more keen on Hugh in this film than I am. I don't think it's his best performance ever, but we get to see him with another huge Hollywood star on set. And, people, I think when you think of Hugh Grant, if you don't know his films that well, you just kind of picture him with Emma Thompson. That's about it. But he's starred with so many great Hollywood actors.
Yeah.
But like you said, the film itself doesn't do itself justice. It got off to a great start. It's like he was running the 800 meters, ran the first half, blitzed it in front of the field, and then, ends up coming last and everyone's overtaking him. It's one of those. And disappointing to be said. And I agree with you. We have been taking Hugh for granted in this film.
It's a sad ending to the podcast, but it only reflects the second half of the film, which is sad and strange.
They made us have a bad ending or sad ending.
Exactly. And for that, I curse the people who produced this film. Who produced that again? Oh yeah, Harvey Weinstein. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Oscar, despite this film being a bag of shite, I did very much enjoy talking to you about it, as I always do.
I did as well. And you know what? It's good entertainment for the first hour. I would recommend people checking it out. Just for that.
Genuinely, it's a great film. Just imagine if it ended when
you just said it was terrible.
Yeah. No,
it's a great crap film. It's a great film.
It's a bag of shite. It's brilliant. No, the first half is a great film. Ladies and gentlemen out there, thank you so much for listening. There are more of you than usual, and we just want to say thank you so much. The more children we have, much like Hugh, the more our love grows for them. And please join the army. Join us on Twitter. We're at Taking Hugh. And on Facebook and Instagram, we're at Taking Hugh for Granted. We post silly pictures on there and have lots of lovely bants with all of you. And it's great fun.
Diggory is the king of internet memes. The king of Hugh Grant memes on the internet.
Yeah, mate. If there's any Hugh Grant memes out there, you best believe I was the creator. The big daddy. The big cheese. Oscar, I just want to thank you so much again. I'm having such a wild and wonderful ride with you.
So am I, mate.
I was saying to you before the podcast, when I'm allowed to get a bit real now, I didn't think we'd be here. I didn't think we'd make it this far. I thought, our mums would listen. We'd maybe get a few listeners. We wouldn't really garner a great community. But quite the opposite have happened. We've garnered this wonderful community. We've got a couple more listens. Some other people's mums are listening to as well. And these films have been fantastic. And with you, Oscar, great fun to review. So thank you so much for that.
Pleasure as always, mate.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.
Taking Hugh for Granted is produced, edited and presented by Diggory Waite and Oscar Beardmore Gray. The producers of Taking Hugh for Granted would like to state that this podcast is in no way associated with the actor Hugh John Mungo Grant, nor does it endorse his views or represent him in any way. Instead, by creating this podcast, Oscar and Diggory hope to celebrate Hugh's illustrious career, reliving his old classics and shedding light on some of his hidden gems. Hugh, if you're listening, we hope you approve.